Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I had to do this as a recording because I have something else this afternoon. So today lecture would be on Anthelminths or Antihelminthics and also Antiprotozoal. So the bulk of the lecture will be on Anthelminthics and would be only a small part of this lecture will be on Antiprotozoal. Okay, let's talk about some of the learning objectives that we expect you to know by the end of the lecture is that you have to know about antihelminthic drug lah, classification, MOA, PK and so on. And then the only antiprotozoal drug that I will touch in this lecture would be metronidazole. Now, this is the outline of the lecture. We're going to talk about what are helminths and then what are the antihelminthic drugs as well as the antiprotozoal drug, which is only metronidazole. Okay, when we talk about antihelminthics, you have to have the worms lah kan, because it's a drug that you use to kill the worm. Okay, so helminths are worm-like parasites, so they are invertebrates. I'm pretty sure you all know this already. This is just a recap, and you know this. I think you know this a lot more than I do. You have learned a lot in your parasitology. Okay. Now, they are invertebrates that characterized by elongated, flat or round bodies and develop through there would be an egg stage, larva stage, and also adult stages. Now, there's three sort of forms or types of worms. One is nematodes. So nematodes are round worms. They are usually in the form of adult and larva, and they are bisexual and cylindrical in nature. So they inhabit the intestine as well as the extra intestine. So meaning that they are also can affect or infect your tissues. So these are some of the examples of the nematodes: Ascaris, Trichuris, cutaneous larva migrans, and Wuchereria. Now, the next one is trematodes. So trematodes is also called flukes. Okay, they are flatworms, but they shape like a leaf. Okay, so it has a prominent oral and ventral suckers. So dia ada tempat untuk hisap darah lah. Okay, and they are hermaphroditic except for blood flukes. And these trematodes include Schistosoma species and Paragonimus westermani. Now, the last one would be the cestodes. So, cestodes ni flatworm juga, cuma dia kita panggil tapeworms. Okay. Kenapa dia tapeworm? Dia bukan leaf-like. Tadi leaf-like kan? Okay. So, cestodes is elongated and segmented flatworms. Okay. So, they inhabit the intestinal lumen and in larva form can go to the extra intestinal tissue. So, dia boleh pergilah deposited mana-mana selain daripada perut lah, daripada intestine. Okay. Okay, so these are the list of antihelminthics that I will be covering in my lecture. Okay, I know it's a lot. Kalau nak kira a lot, memang lagi banyak dalam you punya buku lah. Tapi ini the ones that I want to focus on. Okay, kalau banyak-banyak ni, tolonglah ingat benzimidazole group. Okay, so that's the big or the main group that you can use for almost all of the helminths lah. Okay. So there's benzimidazoles, which include albendazole and mebendazole, and then we have piperazine and its derivative, which is DEC. We have pyrantel palmoate, praziquantel, and niclosamide. So I'll go through each of them. Ada yang banyak, ada yang dia punya information tu tak adalah banyak sangat. So you can probably, if you are interested to know more, you can learn on your own time. Okay, these are the mechanism of antihelminthics. In general, antihelminthics ini yang dia boleh buat. Okay, so one, it can inhibit microtubule synthesis. It can induce paralysis. So a bulk of it actually induce paralysis lah because the worms cannot move kan. Okay, and also inhibit metabolism. So when it inhibit metabolism, there's no production of energy. Of course, there's no movements lah. Okay, die lah kan if you don't have energy. Okay. Right. So itu mechanism of action in general. Sekarang kita pergi to each of the antihelminthics or anthelminthics. So nama tu sama. So kata korang kau nak pakai yang mana. Okay, so the first one is benzimidazole. So benzimidazole, as I mentioned before, ada dua kan. So albendazole and mebendazole. So you have to know apa beza antara dua ni. Okay, mechanism of action dia dulu is it inhibits synthesis of microtubule. Kenapa? Dia selectively bind to the beta tubulin. So bila dia bind to beta tubulin, so what happen is that it will affect the microtubule function. So they cannot cause microtubule polymerization and tak boleh nak form microtubule. Okay. So what happened? You all know what microtubule do. So microtubule ni yang dalam animals lah, dalam worms lah. Okay. Okay. So the microtubule function, you all know this already. It is to maintain the cell structure, form the cytoskeleton and internal structure, and also platforms for intracellular support. So if you don't have a proper microtubule, I mean if the parasite or the worm doesn't have a proper microtubule and not able to function as a normal microtubule, so they will lose all of these functions. Okay, so itu main function dia. Dia also ada other mechanism of action. So which includes reduced glucose uptake. So you all know kalau tak ada glucose, dia tak boleh nak convert into energy kan. So no energy. It can also inhibit mitochondrial fumarate reductase. So kenapa kegunaan fumarate reductase ni? So this is where you have anaerobic glucose metabolism. So that will lead to reduce in the energy of organism. Lepas tu of course lah organism parasite or worm ni tak ada energy. It cannot move lah kan. There's no move. So you get paralysis. And it also cause uncoupling of oxidative phosphorylation, which means that no energy again, then there will be paralysis of the worms. Okay, in terms of pharmacokinetics, dua-dua ni kita boleh bagi oral. Cumanya dua-dua ni akan go through an extensive first pass metabolism. However, albendazole dia punya first pass metabolism dia adalah active metabolite, whereas mebendazole first pass metabolism dia akan produce inactive metabolites. So apa ni maksud dia? Maksud dia adalah albendazole ni dia boleh pergi dekat tisu-tisu lain. Okay, sebab dia active metabolite tu boleh diserap. Sedangkan mebendazole ni lepas dia masuk dalam GIT, okay, first pass metabolism dia jadi inactive. So dia tak boleh nak bekerja. Okay, alright. So apa maksudnya ni? Maksudnya satu boleh pergi kat tisu, satu lagi hanya confined in the gastrointestinal space. So meaning that satu boleh guna dua-dua. Satu boleh guna dekat worms yang dekat dalam kita punya GIT. Satu lagi kita boleh guna dekat whatever parasitic or worm infection dekat the tissues. Okay. Albendazole is distributed to tissues including CNS. So kalau ada masalah dengan worm infestation dalam brain ke benda lava dia kan. So you can use albendazole. However, mebendazole tak ada guna. Kenapa tak ada guna? Sebab dia tak boleh nak pergi kat tisu. Dia punya kerja hanyalah dekat worm in the GIT sahaja. Okay. See, only 10% is absorbed and about 90% of the drug is protein bound. So apa maksudnya protein bound? So you all kena ingat balik lah drug-drug interaction with drugs that have high protein bound drugs dengan other drugs that is protein bound drug as well. Okay, spectrum ni maksudnya apa? Spectrum of activity lah. Which type of worms that it acts on. Okay, so with benzimidazole, a lot of spectrum. Okay, dia boleh guna untuk ascariasis, trichuriasis, hookworm, pinworm. And ini untuk the GIT ones lah, gastrointestinal confined punya worm infestation sahaja. Tapi albendazole, kan I dah cakap dia boleh being absorbed kan, and then the absorbed one is the active metabolite. So what happen is that it can also go to the tissues. So you can use it for parasitic tissue infection such as hydatid diseases. Okay, so hydatid diseases ni is a cystic echinococcosis. Okay, so parasitic infection caused by tapeworm, and it can cause cysts to grow in the liver or other organs. And we also have neurocysticercosis. Okay, neurocysticercosis, you all know this is infection caused by tapeworm Tinea solium. Okay, Tinea solium ni babi kan. Tinea saginata is from beef kan. Okay. And also, you can use it for cutaneous larva migrans. So, nampak kan cutaneous larva migrans ni, you boleh nampak dia bawah skin you lah. Okay. Okay. Alright. ADRS, adverse drug reactions. Okay. The usual one macam biasalah, GIT punya problems, diarrhea, vomiting and nausea. You know, your favourite adverse drug reaction yang selalu you letak dalam exam. Okay. Tapi the more important one or the more serious one would be if you use benzimidazole in long-term use or high-dose use. They can cause alopecia. Okay. It can cause hepatotoxicity, bone marrow suppression. And please be reminded that it can lead to drug-drug interactions, especially when you co-administered with drugs that induce or inhibit CYP450. Kenapa? Sebab dia metabolized by the liver kan tadi kan? Okay. Alright. So mebendazole contraindicated in pregnancy. You cannot use in pregnancy. Kenapa? Walaupun dia selective to beta-tubulin dekat dalam worm or parasite, but it can also affect some microtubule functions in human, especially baby yang tengah growing tu. Okay, so that's the reason why it's contraindicated in pregnancy. Okay, mebendazole is contraindicated in pregnancy. Albendazole, dia tak ada kata contraindicated. However, its safety has not been established. So you want to avoid lah kalau boleh. Okay, unless you tak ada choice lain. Okay, itu je benzimidazole. Benzimidazole banyak itu saja yang you kena tahu. Alright, so next one is piperazine. And please remember that DEC is a synthetic derivative of piperazine. Okay, mechanism of action, dia adalah GABA receptor agonist. Dah GABA pula dah. Korang ingat balik lah korang punya CNS hari tu. Okay, so GABA receptor agonist, you all remember that it increase the chloride conductance. Okay, chloride conductance dekat mana? Dekat worm lah, dekat parasite punya muscle membrane. And this leads to hyperpolarization, and hyperpolarization would lead to muscle relaxation and lead to paralysis. So, bila dia paralyzed, dia tak boleh nak bergerak, animal tu akan matilah. Okay. Now, when we talk about piperazine, it has a good absorption. So, maksudnya apa? Kalau dia boleh ada good absorption, dia boleh pergi dekat tisu. Bila dia boleh pergi dekat tisu, you boleh pakai untuk tissue parasitic infection. Okay. It's excreted unchanged in urine. Some of the adverse drug reactions include neurotoxicity. Dia boleh pergi kat brain Okay. Allergy and Mazotti reaction. Ni korang balik cari sendiri Mazotti reaction ni apa benda. Okay. And Mazotti reaction is usually due to the use of its derivative, which is DEC. Okay. Now, piperazine is contraindicated in pregnancy, in impaired renal and liver functions because it needs to be metabolized, as well as it needs the renal, the kidney to excrete. Okay, and also neurologic diseases or epilepsy because it can cause neurotoxicity tadi kan. Okay. Alright, spectrum kita nak guna bila? Okay, untuk piperazine lebih very narrow use, which is only ascariasis. Okay. DEC kita boleh guna banyak sedikit. Contoh Wuchereria bancrofti, Brugia malayi or Brugia timori, and loa disease. Okay. So ini sepatutnya italic I yang tak italickan tulisan tu. Okay. Alright. So ada beza sedikit lah antara piperazine dengan dia punya synthetic derivatives. Okay, itu je piperazine. Tak ada dah, finish dah. Okay, so we're moving on along to another antihelminthic drugs, which is pyrantel palmoate. Okay, now the name is mouthful, but it's not that, tak adalah banyak sangat benda pasal dia. Okay, now pyrantel palmoate ni dia buat apa? So if you remember your MSK, then you remember depolarizing neuromuscular blocker. So this one acts at the sort of neuromuscular junction lah dekat the parasite. So what does it do? It increase ACH release, it inhibit ACH, E or acetylcholinesterase. So you all remember kan, kalau ACH increase leads to a stimulation of the nicotinic receptor. Too much stimulation of nicotinic receptor would lead to paralysis kan. Okay. So dia akan dapat depolarization as well as leading to paralysis. And that would lead to, bila you paralyze or bila all these worms ni kan, dia akan hook dekat your intestinal wall for some reason kan. Okay. So when it's paralyzed, it release the attachment to host intestinal wall. Okay. When do we use parental palmate? Okay. So we use it as an alternative. Sebab kita ada benda lain kan. Kau boleh pakai piperazine, kau boleh pakai albendazole tadi. Okay, so you can use parental palmate as an alternative for ascariasis and enterobiasis. You can also use it as a treatment for, bukan alternatif lah, so first line pun tak apa, hookworm and pinworm. Okay, what are the things that you have to know about parental palmate? So the pharmacokinetics, it has poor GI absorption. Apa maksudnya? Bila dia poor GI absorption, dia punya action hanya dalam intestinal lumen sahaja. So means that it cannot cross and go to the tissue. It cannot do anything to tissue parasite infection. Elimination is via stool. So akan keluar balik lah dalam you punya pup-pup lah. Okay. And adverse drug reaction, dia tak banyak sangat. Dia hanya ada transient and mild GI symptoms, which is nausea, vomiting, diarrhea and so on. Okay, itu je parental palmate. Pendek je kan? Okay, so you happy now by this time? Okay, how about praziquantel? So we're going to move on to the next one, which is praziquantel. So praziquantel, again, this one induce paralysis. So nampak tak ada beberapa dah yang induce paralysis kan? The first one je yang microtubule if affect the microtubule. Tapi yang lagi dua tu, yang sebelum ni, yang I cakap sebelum praziquantel ni, causes paralysis. So sama juga, praziquantel pun also induce paralysis. Cuma cara dia induce paralysis sedikit berbeza, which is increase the permeability of trematode and cestode to calcium. Okay, so banyak calcium, okay, which lead to basically paralysis lah. And bila dia paralyzed, dia tak boleh nak gunakan tenaga dia untuk stuck dekat the GI wall. Okay, so it will lead to dislodgement and of course lah death lah, sebab dia dah tak boleh nak bergerak kan. Okay, in terms of pharmacokinetics, it has good oral absorption. Maksudnya apa? Again, good oral absorption means that it can act at the parasitic tissue infection. Itu je. Okay, so you all ingat macam ni je. Good oral absorption, tissue. Good oral absorption, tissue. Kalau poor, it only acts at the lumen sahaja. Okay, alright. So this one can also cross blood-brain barrier. So kalau untuk benda-benda yang memerlukan, if you have CNS infection with parasite, then you can use praziquantel as well as albendazole tadi yang cakap. Okay, and also DAC. Okay, it's metabolized by the liver and excretion is by kidney. So considering the metabolism by the liver, what is the potential drug-drug interaction? You should know by this stage lah. When you think about liver, you have to think about cytochrome. You have to think about enzyme inducer or enzyme inhibitor. So when you give it together with other drugs that affect the liver punya cytochrome enzyme, then dia akan menyebabkan ada side effects of this drug. Okay, adverse drug reaction. So most of the time with even bukan praziquantel saja, tapi all the other anthelminths as well, because you have to remember these are all dying worms kan. So dying worms would release proteins, and this release of proteins is foreign to our body. So bila dia foreign to our body, your body would respond by having allergic reactions. Okay, so you get all the allergic reactions lah, fever, pruritus, urticaria, eosinophilia and so on. Okay, and other adverse reactions include GIT symptoms, the usual ones that you like, yang you suka cerita dalam adverse effects kalau tiap kali soalan exam tu. Okay, arthralgia, myalgia. Okay, and praziquantel ni bila you pakai dalam neurocystic cirrhosis, it can worsen neurologic symptoms. Okay, sebab tadilah dia akan cause inflammation dekat dalam brain bila you have too much of dying worms or dying larva tu. Okay, bila kita tak boleh guna praziquantel? Okay, contraindication dia adalah ocular cysticercosis bila dia ada dalam mata, cysticercosis yang melibatkan mata, dan juga spinal neurocysticercosis. So cysticercosis yang dekat dalam spine, okay? Because death of the worms can lead to irreparable damage to the nerves lah. Okay, to the nerves, mata kan, and then nerves in the spines lah. Alright. Spectrum kita nak guna bila? Kita boleh pakai dalam schistosome infection. So any schistosoma species, and most trematode and cystode infections, which also include cysticercosis. Okay, itu je praziquantel. So the last one on antihelminthic drugs would be niclosamide. Betul kot? Last, aku pun tak ingat dah. Okay, so the last one is niclosamide. So niclosamide mechanism of action is to inhibit metabolism. Okay, so ini je lah kot. Ini dengan additional mechanism of action of benzimidazole tadi yang inhibit oxidative phosphorylation kan. Okay, so inhibit metabolism, what does it do? Okay, inhibit metabolism or inhibit oxidative phosphorylation would lead to dia akan affect the production of ATP lah. So production of ATP will be affected. Then you have no ATP cannot generate, there's no energy kan, so there's no movements of the worms. Okay, alright. Pendek je, PK dia pun tak banyak. PK pharmacokinetics dia, GI absorption dia very minimal. So maksudnya apa? Maksudnya dia hanya bekerja dekat lumen. So it's useful for treatment of the whatever that is there in the lumen. The ones in the tissue cannot. Okay? Alright, so this is usually used as a second line treatment for most of the tapeworms lah. Okay. ADRS sebab dia confined a lot in the GI, then the adverse reactions a lot will be on GIT symptoms. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea lah, the usual ones. Cool. Okay, so spectrum, most of it second line kan yang cakap tadi. So it's a second line treatment for most tapeworms, including beef, pork, fish tapeworms, as well as you can use it for intestinal flukes. Nampak kan intestinal kan, dia tak ada tissue flukes sebab apa? Dia tak boleh nak cross dia tak boleh nak being absorbed in the GIT. So dia tak banyak lah nak masuk dalam systemic circulation tu. Okay, itu je pasal antihelminthics. I have tried to make it as short and sweet as possible. Okay, so kita summarize sikit apa beza antara antihelminthics ni. So dia ada dua jenis je. Satu ialah antihelminthics anthelminths yang have good absorption. Bila dia good absorption, dia boleh pergi tisu. Bila dia boleh pergi tisu, dia boleh guna untuk tissue parasitic infection. And of course, most of the time, bila dia boleh pergi kat tisu, dia juga boleh guna untuk intestinal worm infection as well. That especially particular for albendazole. Yang lain-lain tu kita simpan macam piperazine or DEC, praziquantel kita simpan kepada untuk more like ke tissue tissue punya infection. Okay. The ones with poor absorption is usually only for GI luminal worms infections. Okay. So kalau lah you ada tissue infection or neurocysticercosis and whatnot, you tak boleh pakai ni because it cannot cross. It cannot be absorbed. Okay. So it cannot go to the brain. It cannot go to the tissue. So these are mebendazole, parental palmate, and niclosamide. You can also classify them according to their mechanism of action as well. Whether they induce muscle paralysis, whether it affects the metabolism, whether it affects the microtubule formation. Okay, itu je antihelminthics. Jangan tolonglah, tak payahlah fikir panjang-panjang sangat. At least yang penting you kena tahu dia punya MOA, and then spectrum tu lah, especially spektrum tu kenapa you nak pakai yang mana untuk yang mana, you nak pakai albendazole kat mana, you nak pakai piperazine kat mana, you nak pakai parental palmate kat mana, and so on. Okay, so we are moving on to antiprotozoal. Antiprotozoal pendek je, satu drug je yang aku nak cerita. Sebab antiprotozoal ni sebenarnya we will teach you a lot more in communicable disease because it falls under anti-malarial drugs. Okay, And anti-malarial drugs. Kejap, betul tak? Anti-malarial drugs. Okay. So, anti-malarial, you will learn later in your communicable disease. Okay, nanti sem 4 yang tu. Tapi untuk antiprotozoal yang you akan belajar dekat sini is only metronidazole sahaja. Okay, so I think you all know at this stage antiprotozoa ni apa. So it's a one cell animal. Satu seekor tu walaupun dia kecil, dia ialah satu sel, tapi dia adalah binatang yang satu sel. Okay, and there's 6 phyla lah. It's classified into 6 phyla. So can you name any protozoan species that cause diseases in human? I'm pretty sure you can, but in case you cannot, I will show you lah. Okay, so we have malaria species. Okay, your falciparum malaria, your vivax malaria, and so on. We have Giardia lamblia, Acanthamoeba, which is the one yang Acanthamoeba ni selalunya glamour kalau contact lens yang you tak bersihkan elok-elok. So dia akan pergi buat infection dekat you punya eyes lah. Okay, Leishmania, Cryptosporidium species or Cryptosporidiosis or Trypanosomyces, Toxoplasma gondii and so on and so forth. So banyaklah species protozoa ni, tapi these are some of the ones that can cause you to have diseases. Ada lagi satu Pneumocystis cerevisiae, which is usually common in patients with AIDS lah ataupun HIV. Okay, the one and only drug that you have to know here yang kat sini bukan malaria kat sini adalah metronidazole. Okay, metronidazole ni it's dia punya group is a nitroimidazole group lah. So it's a prodrug. So bila dia prodrug maksudnya dia kena change to something else to become an active ones kan. Okay. So this is a drug of choice for intraluminal amoebiasis. Okay, maksudnya dalam perut lah. Dalam GIT system. Okay. It also have antibacterial activity against anaerobic bacteria. So do not be surprised if you see metronidazole is used for bacteria. Okay, cuma usually is anaerobic lah. So anaerobic ni dekat mana selalunya ada? Dekat perut ataupun your usus lah. Okay. Okay lah, usus lah. Perut tak ada sangat bakteria. H. pylori lah kalau ada. Okay. Alright. So mechanism of action dia macam ni je. So metronidazole, of course lah bila you makan, dia akan pergi masuk dalam badan anaerobic bacteria ataupun the amoeba lah for example or any of the protozoa. Okay, so metronidazole bila dia masuk, dia kena tukar kepada active metabolite sebab metronidazole tu is a prodrug, right? So macam mana nak tukar jadi active metabolite ni? Dengan menggunakan oxidation reduction of ferredoxin. So reduced ferredoxin akan bertukar menjadi oxidized ferredoxin, which yang mana metabolite ni sebenarnya dia punya action dia dengan reduced ferredoxin ni menyebabkan dia akan jadi salah tukar ayat. Okay, kita start balik Okay, metronidazole dia akan react dengan reduced ferredoxin. Okay, and reduced ferredoxin ni bila dia dah react dengan metronidazole, dia akan tukar jadi oxidized ferredoxin. And metronidazole tadi yang lepas reaction dengan reduced ferredoxin akan jadi active metabolites. So what does active metabolites do? So it goes and disrupt the DNA structure and lead to inhibition of nucleic acid synthesis. So basically there's no DNA lah produced kan. So and that would lead to, of course lah, the species, the protozoa punya death or the anaerobic bacteria punya death. Okay, a little bit on the pharmacokinetics. It has good absorption. So bila dia good absorption, dia boleh go to tissues as well kan. Okay. We can use it orally or parenterally. So bagi oral pun boleh, nak bagi IV pun boleh. It cross blood-brain barrier and it's metabolized by the liver. So bila metabolized by the liver, you kena ingat terus ada drug-drug interaction dengan cytochrome enzyme inducing drugs or cytochrome enzyme inhibitor drugs. Okay, when do we use metronidazole? So the spectrum of activity of metronidazole include amoebiasis, Contohnya E. histolica or Giardiasis, Trichomoniasis, and also bacteria lah, which is usually anaerobic or mixed intra-abdominal infections. We can also use it for Clostridium difficile yang menyebabkan yang diarrhea tu kan. Okay. Okay, adverse drug reactions. Apa adverse drug reactions? Metronidazole. So, it has metallic taste in the mouth. Rasa macam ada rasa besi macam tu dalam mulut. Okay. It can lead to pancreatitis, CNS toxicity, disulfiram-like effect. Okay. So, disulfiram-like effect ni maksudnya apa? Maksudnya, disulfiram ni adalah sejenis ubat. Ubat ni digunakan untuk treatment of alcoholism. So, when you give disulfiram to someone who usually takes alcohol, it will lead to a very severe or very bad hangover. Kan? Hangover. Okay. So, bila you bagi metronidazole, tiba-tiba patient tu, aku nak minum alkohol lah malam ni, nak minum whatever lah, wine ke apa benda lah yang dia minum. So, dia boleh dapat a severe hangover. Kenapa? Disulfiram ni, dia punya perangai atau dia punya kerja ialah inhibit enzim aldehyde dehydrogenase. So, aldehyde dehydrogenase ni is supposed to break down the alcohol lah kan, and practically reduce the hangover effect. Kurang lah alkohol tu untuk cause hangover effect. Tapi bila you bagi disulfiram, it will inhibit the enzyme, or metronidazole will inhibit the enzyme and lead to a severe hangover effects. Okay, bear in mind that drug interaction with enzyme or cytochrome enzyme inhibitors and inducers lah. Okay, itu je. Dah tamat dah. Tengok setengah jam. Tak lama pun. Sebenarnya lagi lama kalau I bagi live lecture. Sebab macam biasalah, I kan suka tanya-tanya soalan kan. Tapi because this is a recorded one, it's quite short lah. So, at the end, this is my references. If you need to go and have a look at them, Go Drug Bank is quite a good source for you to have a look at the mechanism of action, even the pharmacodynamics and contraindication and whatnot. Agak best lah juga. Dia senang je nak guna. Okay, the rest macam biasalah, it must be the books. As also some of the online punya source. Okay. If you have any question, you can go to this Padlet. Okay. Okay, nanti you all pakai je lah apa benda tu. QR korang tu lah. QR scanner korang. You can put your questions there and I will answer it there. So, siapa-siapa yang tak ada soalan tu pun pergilah jenguk-jenguk juga. Lekuk-lekuk lah korang boleh tahu apa benda yang kawan-kawan korang tanya kan. Okay, with that being said, thank you very much. I will see you, of course, some of you, my groups for SGS next week on the 17th. Thank you very much. Bye everyone. Assalamualaikum.